Grace and peace, Black family. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. My Hotep. Namaste. Free the land. I'm just coming to you very briefly, beloved. As many of you may know, Robert Mueller just gave an extraordinary, in folks' minds, uh, press conference related to his own report that was what I think about 485 some odd pages or so. Shout out family, Annabus Unk and Mike Lewis, those of you that are tuning in. Family, as you come in, be sure to give us a thumbs up, like, and share, please. Just very briefly, family, I want to just give my little 2 cents on this. I wanted to simply say to us that Robert this Robert Mueller's press conference that he just did, number one, it proves that there are two Americas. It proves that there are two Americas, of course, which we know, but I'm saying every time I see an ostensible manifestation of that, an obvious manifestation of that, I do my best not to fail to point that out. It is so important that we understand that in the here and now, especially in 2019, where we too often suffer from the lie of a so-called post-racist America. There's no such thing. Now, with that being said, a couple of things to keep in mind that Robert Mueller said. One of which is, number one, he made it clear that basically it was insufficient evidence to charge the man that they called President Donald Trump with conspiracy. The media has been going around using the word collusion, 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 even though technically that's not a legal term, but typically they're referring to what can closest be what is properly called conspiracy. It doesn't mean that there was not conspiracy. It just means in his mind it was not sufficient evidence. But he made it clear concerning the obstruction of justice that, shout out Ramona, he made it clear concerning the obstruction of justice that if he cleared the president, he made it clear he would have said so. So it is obvious in his address that Donald Trump was not cleared of obstruction of justice. Let me tell you something. We should not need the formal address from a special counsel investigator, that is to say, a Robert Mueller, to come before America for her to believe that Donald Trump broke the law. Now, this is what's interesting, and this is something that I pointed out on the different podcasts, and that is this. He's made the point that he was prevented from charging Trump because of DOJ, Department of Justice policy. It is the Department of Justice policy that Donald Trump, I'm saying Donald Trump, the president, the president, was unable to be charged in this particular circumstance because of DOJ policy. Now that should tell you something, black man and black woman. That lets you know that white folk in powerful positions are considered to be above the law, and there are provisions in the Department of Justice's policies that prove it, that make it so. Somebody talk black to me. Whereas they make an exception that Trump and someone in his position is above the law, he cannot be charged because it's the Department of Justice policy. Meanwhile, for example, the 13th Amendment makes it plain that slavery never ended officially and fully, because the 13th Amendment says that there is an exception. It says that slavery can exist, slavery doesn't exist except, the word except is used in the 13th Amendment, except. Are y'all hearing me? Yes, Ramona, it was structured to uphold the power dynamic, absolutely, but for white people. But the 13th Amendment says about slavery, which was us, what? That slavery was supposed to be abolished. It should not exist except what? The fact that one is considered to be convicted of a crime, a felon, for example. So what did America do? America put a trick in the law. She went about criminalizing all sorts of conduct in order to drive us back onto the plantation. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said last century how America uses its laws for technology. We see that manifest left and right. Is that not true? So meanwhile, there's an exception in the Department of Justice. They can bring laws. They can act against you. They can have their prosecutors initiate charges and indictment against you. But they make an exception for the President of the United States to where he doesn't have to worry about being criminally charged. Mueller makes it clear that there are other ways he can be held accountable. That is to say, impeachment. That's Congress's job. That's supposed to be one of three branches of government that are supposed to be co-equal branches, right? But even with the impeachment, that just means that this white man he just loses one of his jobs. That's as president, which he was never going to keep for a lifetime anyway. It just means he loses one of his jobs. He gets to go back now to his multi-billion dollar empire that he is benefiting from because of the presidency, because him being president was nothing but a big PR campaign in the first place. It bolsters his business brand. It got him some hookups and favors from different countries. I want you to see how they make exceptions for them. Yes, even with an impeachment, he might go out as disgraced, but he can still start his life over again. It's not like he's behind bars, even though if other jurisdictions pick up on bringing crimes against him and his family and his businesses, he may very well still be able to be criminally charged after he's no longer president. But one of the reasons I believe he's working so hard to maintain the presidency, even though on the one hand, I don't believe he ever wanted to be president, but one of the benefits of him continuing to be president is that he can try to run out the clock on some of the things that he can be charged with so that the statute of limitations is up. Somebody talk black to me. I also believe that one of the benefits of him remaining president and winning a second election is not because he's good at it, not because he wants the presidency, but because it might be politically expedient for him, legally expedient for him, because that way he can install more judges. That way he can install attorney generals that will obstruct justice and interfere with investigations and so forth, like Barr is doing. I believe one of the benefits of him doing that is also, so if he is kicked out, his buddies that come behind him, or Pence, who's the vice president, if he becomes president, they very well may pardon Donald Trump or his family members if they are duly brought before different courts and charged and convicted. I believe these are the benefits of him trying to work so hard to remain president, right? Absolutely, Ramon. He's stacking the courts. But one of the things that I want us to see is, isn't it something how it is official Department of Justice policy that he can't be criminally charged, but they have all manner of laws that work against the black man and the black woman disproportionately. There is a provision in the 13th Amendment specifically talking about slavery, where there is an exception where there's not supposed to be slavery, except if you're duly convicted, which is why, again, they went about making all types of conduct criminal so that they could drive us back onto the plantation. And we know now that the Neo plantation is a prison, and it's the prison industrial complex. There are two Americas. We've always known it. This is a glaring and obvious, more glaring and obvious and recent evidence of it. And it should shore up our resolve to come out of this system, to work to bolster our people, because God is at work in the world. We've got so much going on right now. But I wanted us to see the fact that there's an exception for them. We know it's wild exceptions, because how is it that this godless man can receive such overwhelming support from so-called evangelical Christians, which means white Christians? That should prove to black people that we don't serve the same God as they do. Somebody talk black to me. This man, where it's irrefutable evidence, he's credibly alleged to be a racist, Through his business practices, he's had to pay back millions of dollars in settlements. He and his father and so forth, statements that he's made, actions that he's made, provable that he's a racist. But not just a racist, he's credibly alleged to be a rapist, even by his first wife. And we certainly know that he's also credibly alleged to be a sexual assaulter. Even if we put aside his multiple accusers, we can just take his word for it. Don't ever forget that we have him on video, audio, video, where he tells us that women, a woman, and women in general can come upon him. He can comes upon a woman like he comes upon a woman rather like a bitch. That's his words, not mine. Grabs them by the vagina, but he uses the more derogatory term. And majority white women vote him in, and an even larger majority, my understanding, of white evangelical women vote him in. We don't serve the same God as they. Further proving how the hijack of the Me Too movement by the Beckys of the world bolsters white supremacy. And when you study the origins of women's suffrage, which is really white women's suffrage, they never wanted black people, and especially the black man, to get the vote. That's per their own words. That's in the records. And in fact, their own records, one of them is on record as saying how white supremacy will be bolstered. It will be strengthened by white women getting the right to vote. We're seeing vestiges of that. We're seeing the realities of that by the hijacking of the Me Too movement because of who simply voted for Trump. I'm not endorsing Democrats or Trump. We certainly know the devastation the Democratic Party has been to us. They've been nicer about it. But I'm not fixing the cake for Trump either. Somebody talk black to me. He's more straightforward. And when people show you who they are, believe them. But we're not going, if you in your right mind, you're not caping for one over the other. Unless someone is specifically talking about doing something that's in the black interest. Anyway, I just wanted to briefly share that with you all. There are certainly two Americas. We've always known that. The Mueller investigation and the acknowledgement, the policy of the Department of Justice to exempt him from being criminally charged as president shows you that he is indeed above the law. While they have an exception in the law that says that we can remain in basically perpetual slavery so long as they label us as a criminal. Somebody talk black to me. But you're regurgitating Democratic talking points. I'm not regurgitating Democratic talking points. And I'm not going to continue to address people that do not use their brains to address me. Everything I said is based on fact. Everything that I said is based on reality. Peace. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you like and share.